Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Sorry, it's been so long. The beginning of my semester has been absolutely crazy with work just throwing a bunch of stuff and stupid training that no one needs and that kind of thing. I got handed a couple classes I've never taught before late, so I've just been really busy. But things are going well for me and Tori, and I finally have some time to get back to reviewing some books. So I'm excited about that. I'm really excited to talk about this book, Nocturnos by Laura Perez. This is new out from Fantagraphics. Laura Perez is someone whose work I came across on Instagram like really early in the history of doing this channel. And so someone whose work I've been following pretty much the last 5 6 years or whatever, that I've been 5 years that I've been doing this. And so always excited when new stuff comes out from Laura Perez. I think Fantagraphics now is probably caught up on everything that hasn't been translated, but I could be wrong about that. Nocturnos sees Laura Perez continuing down, and I'll go ahead and say it right out the gate, kind of like perfecting the approach that she's been taking in her last two books, Totem and Occultos, where it's more of a lyrical approach, and in this book, there's pretty much all story goes away, and it's just a tribute to the night in total. And so I think in this one, like Laura Perez's voice as a comic artist is coming through. I don't know if this is the approach she's always going to take from here out, but it feels like an artist kind of going deeper into their approach. So this book is just a tribute to the night, to Nocturnos, and it starts with a Baudelaire quote: "The night illuminates what the day conceals," and that's a quote I quite like. I'm a huge fan of the night. I've always preferred being up at night. I'm a night owl. I like the ambiguity of a dark night, and I think that's true. That like the because of the darkness and the room for imagination and the lack of ability to see all the details, and I don't know. There's just something about the night that is quite illuminating. So I really like that quote at the beginning. And then that's pretty much what the book is. It's like this tribute to the night. And it starts out, you can see here, in like a cave. They're taking shelter, and they're talking about taking shelter at the night so we can see more clearly. And then we get this really kind of fluid, beautiful jump here between the fire in the cave to the light on in the big apartment building. And that's how this book works. It's almost like a stream of consciousness. Like I could imagine, I don't know if this is how it was made, but I can imagine as this was being made, what Laura Perez was doing was just kind of working a panel at a time, or a 2 or 3 page sequence at a time, and finding those transitions into the next sequence. Here there's a little bit of writing that I really like. "The night is a place of contrasts. In it we find magic, but also melancholy." And I totally feel that nighttime is where I find magic. You know, that is where there's less given to me visually, and so I can just fill in and interpret and have an imagination and things like that. And I think that's kind of what is being suggested here. Also, we're talking about, night is a place of contrast, this really beautiful, stark, contrasty image. So that's how the book flows, is you'll have this woman, and she's looking out the window and she sees the stars, and then you'll flip to stars somewhere else, and then you're kind of coming down into some other scenario. It could be a different place, a different time, different time in history, and the book just keeps flowing like that, where all these little stories across the globe throughout time intermingle to paint a portrait of night itself rather than any of the characters. There's a really interesting sequence here where it's almost like Laura Perez. The way I think about a lot of this is almost like an incantation to the night. Like she's almost evoking the night magically through a spell, and some of that, yeah, is influenced by the fact that she's done work that has like an occult feel, and Totem, Occultos, an occult bent to it. But it seems like this is almost like a magical summoning of the night, all these different little pieces, like it's little memes that come together to that bigger idea of the night. And what's really interesting in this one is you have all these rounded edges on this page, and so you've got this character here when you flip it, it comes to this character. You see this character here standing from the previous page. That's like in a circle here. And so these almost all become like thought bubbles for this character here, which as you're reading the book at first goes, oh, okay, wait, like this opening sequence is all in this character's head. And then you come to the character in the car, and Laura Perez played a trick on me. This is actually the main character. That's not the case. It still just keeps up that kind of evocation flow. But I particularly like this page of stuffing everything else into this character's head. And again, this one being so just not I shouldn't say disorganized, but there's no non sequitur. There's no connection between any of them other than the relationship to the night. Yeah, that strikes me as some kind of hoodoo voodoo in comics going on there. All throughout the book, there's a lot of cool rhythmic stuff. So on a spread like this, you have a lot of interesting subdivisions going on, where here you've got the 3, but then it's split again by this bar. That kind of comes across the middle here. This little piece lines up here, that lines up there. Those are just kind of composition tricks that really fascinate me. I was doing a lot of that in Bound, so I really like seeing that when people work on the spread and they think rhythmically in terms of subdivision and dividing the 3 and the 2, all of that makes for really cool work. And again, it gives a sense of like that poetic musical feel to the book that is evocation of something. You kind of have this like rhythmical flow to everything as well. Really beautiful page here. This is obviously the cover, but I love these fantastical images. So this book doesn't even constrain itself to sequences that are necessarily happening in reality. You have fantastical sequences like this. Some really interesting like shifts in style too on this sequence, where you jump from the moon and then you get the moon to like the spider, and then you got the diagrams of the spider. There's a really interesting thought in this sequence, and that can happen throughout the book, right? Because you're kind of checking in these little slices of other people's lives. But this was one of my favorite sequences of writing. They're talking about being able to communicate just with our minds. And it says, but it seemed like these other creatures that they were communicate with they were explaining what they could understand, as if they were many ways to communicate, but each limited to whatever creature was using them. For me, as a human, only some of them are useful. For a bird, others would be useful. They were explaining it using an object I can't really describe. It wasn't a book or an electronic device. It had descriptive drawings, very simple. Seems like they weren't in color, just shades of gray, but glowing. So maybe suggesting kind of like a comic. But I really like that idea, and it's something me and Tori have been talking about a lot lately, actually, is just kind of the communication barriers between, creatures, animals, entities that have different perceptual systems. Like I can communicate to my dog so much, but there's things about smell that they could never communicate to me, right? And then you're talking about like what kind of things maybe just fall entirely out of our perceptual systems, I think is part of what Laura's suggesting here. Again, going with that occultism, that there may be things outside of our perceptual systems that you can get in contact with, and some of that may be related to the mysticism she has about the night. And then this sequence here, I just put a note out, and I thought it was funny because I do love the dark so much, because I love night so much. I love all the like retinal patterns you get when it's dark, and you get kind of the just like those fake rainbow colors in your head. And one of my favorite things to do is just go take a bath and turn out all the lights. So this page too is someone who enjoys the dark and enjoys the night. This idea of like an isolation bath. I've always wanted to do that. Isolation tank sounds like my ideal environment. So yeah, floating in the bath in the dark, like all the way throughout. I think that's my ultimate takeaway from this book, is that as someone who's also a lover of night, lover of the dark, lover of the mystery of it all, and I don't know, the vibes, like this book very clearly communicates that in so many different ways. And I think that shows that Laura Perez really is a strong devotee of the night, someone who really loves the night and knows all the kind of experiences and is trying to put that out in a book. So very different from any other comic I've read, I think, in that kind of approach of just paying tribute to something more abstract like the night. But very, very successful, beautiful imagery all throughout, really interesting thoughts in the writing. So even though you're not getting a more standard narrative, I think you're getting a very complete, well-rounded reading experience. And I'd very highly recommend this. And I really look forward to seeing what Laura Perez does next. Like I said, this seems like a condensation and distillation of everything else she's done before, but into something even more unique and more personal and more singular. So I hope that process continues on, but no matter what, I am excited to see whatever comes next from this artist.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.